Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 3rd July, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is facing economic headwinds as a Beijing think tank proposes issuing 30 trillion yuan in treasury bonds to stimulate growth and address local government debt. Top brokerages, however, predict Chinese stocks will stagnate in the latter half of the year due to deflationary pressures, weak earnings, and a lack of market catalysts. Minister Li Leqiang is focused on tackling oversupply and excessive competition within the solar photovoltaic (PV) sector. New universities funded by tycoons, such as Fuyao University and Eastern Institute of Technology, are beginning to enroll undergraduate students. Advances in aerospace continue, with Lincoln Tianxing Technology revealing a reusable liquid rocket. Despite these advancements, Apple's iPhone sales in mainland China are expected to decline in the latter half of 2025, impacted by weak consumer spending and an aging iPhone cycle. Aviation authorities are also cracking down on safety, banning substandard power banks on flight. In terms of foreign policy, China seeks to balance its relationships with various global powers. Foreign Minister Wang Yi reassured the EU of China's peaceful intentions and called for a rational understanding of China. He also expressed that China does not want Russia to lose in Ukraine, fearing the US would then focus on Beijing. China maintains its position on the selection of the next Dalai Lama. A top Chinese official criticized US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for inciting conflict with warnings about China's military ambitions in Asia, while Liu Jiankao criticized the Trump administration's national security policies. China asserted its right to shoot down foreign drones intruding into its airspace near disputed islands, increasing the potential for drone warfare with Japan over the Diaoyu Island. The Chinese military is showcasing its capabilities, with the aircraft carrier Shandong making its first port call in Hong Kong to promote patriotism and demonstrate China's military advancements, reflecting the SEA Navy's ambition for broader maritime reach. Economically, China is adopting a less confrontational stance with the US after confirming details of a trade framework with Washington. Both countries are easing export restrictions, suggesting a potential improvement in trade relations, although analysts remain cautious about potential backlash. The US has lifted export controls on semiconductor design software to China amidst ongoing trade discussions. Dajia Insurance Group Company Limited has finalized the divestment of Ambang Insurance Group Company Limited's overseas holdings, concluding a government-led restructuring. China Great Wall Asset Management Company Limited is undergoing a capital and ownership restructuring after the Ministry of Finance transferred its stake to Central Region Investment Limited. Economist Huang Yaiping suggested Hong Kong as a potential location for a stablecoin pegged to the offshore yuan, considering China's capital controls. Turning to the United States, the US is actively trying to influence global trade and security. The US is pressuring countries like Vietnam to reduce trade with China, using tariffs as an economic tool. The US has also lifted export controls on semiconductor design software to China amidst ongoing trade discussions. In Europe, ECB President Christine Lagarde and other central bankers met in Portugal to discuss strategies for enhancing Europe's competitiveness against the US and China. Russia has become the first country to formally recognize the Taliban government in Afghanistan since the group seized power in 2021, following its removal of the Taliban from its list of outlawed organizations in April. This recognition aims to boost economic cooperation and assist Kabul in addressing drug trafficking and terrorism. Relations between Russia and Azerbaijan have cooled due to contentious arrests in both countries, potentially diminishing Russia's influence in the Caucasus region. Major General Mikhail Gudkov, a deputy commander of the Russian Navy, recently promoted by President Putin, was killed in a Ukrainian missile attack near the front line with Ukraine in the Kursk region. Moscow confirmed Gudkov's death occurred during combat work in one of the border districts of the Kursk region. President Vladimir Putin, in an hour-long call with then-US President Donald Trump, insisted Russia would not step back from its goals in Ukraine, stating future talks need to be between Kyiv and Moscow, and indicating Russia does not want us involvement. Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, a close ally of President Putin, is reportedly ailing, sparking speculation about succession in the Russian region of Chechnya. Ukraine has launched multiple airstrikes into Lipetsk, a strategically important region in Russia, with an airbase that serves as the chief training center for the Russian aerospace forces. Switching focus to Afghanistan, the Taliban government has announced that Russia is the first country to officially recognize their rule, calling it a brave decision, after talks with the Russian ambassador in Kabul. This recognition follows Moscow's removal of the Taliban from its list of outlawed organizations and aims to boost economic cooperation and help Kabul tackle drug trafficking and terrorism. Turning to the United States, the Supreme Court has cleared the way for the deportation of 8 men, mostly from countries like Vietnam, South Korea, and Mexico, to South Sudan, a country where almost none of them have ties. Wardsa Kaik, a 22-year-old stateless Palestinian woman who came to the U.S. aged 8, was released from immigration detention after more than 4 months of confinement. Then, President Donald Trump said his call with Russian President Vladimir Putin yielded no progress on a Ukraine ceasefire during an hour-long conversation. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the country has launched multiple airstrikes into Lipetsk, a strategically important region in Russia with an airbase that serves as the chief training center for the Russian aerospace forces. Major General Mikhail Gudkov, a deputy commander of the Russian Navy, personally promoted by President Putin, and who previously led one of Russia's most notorious brigades, was killed in a Ukrainian missile attack near the front line with Ukraine in the Kursk region. Gaza has experienced a devastating escalation of the conflict, as Israel intensified its offensive, resulting in a bombardment that killed approximately 90 people, including cardiologist Marwan al-Sultan, his wife, and 5 children. An Israeli strike on a school, sheltering Palestinian families in Gaza, resulted in over 300 Palestinians killed in 48 hours, while another attack on a beach cafe in Gaza killed at least 39 people, including a 1-year-old girl. Many Gazans have sought shelter in school buildings, which have repeatedly come under Israeli attacks, with the military stating it targets Hamas militants hiding among civilians. In neighboring Lebanon, an Israeli drone attack near Beirut killed at least 1 person and injured 3 others. The ongoing conflict has drawn international condemnation, with UN expert Francesca Albanese calling for sanctions and an arms embargo on Israel. Albanese is also advocating for global corporations to be held accountable for profiting from genocide in Gaza, accusing major companies of profiting from Israeli occupation. Amnesty International issued a report stating Israel is using starvation tactics against Palestinians to continue to commit genocide in the Gaza Strip during its war with Hamas, employing a controversial system to distribute aid. Ceasefire efforts are in progress, with Hamas seeking guarantees that negotiations will lead to a permanent end to the Gaza war before releasing all remaining hostages. Israeli officials said prospects for reaching a ceasefire and hostage deal appeared high nearly 21 months since the war between Israel and Hamas began. The rise of al-Din al-Haddad in the Hamas chain of command suggests the group will hold firm to its position, demanding a total end to the war before releasing all remaining hostages. In a cultural initiative, Gaza musicians performed at the Sydney Opera House, aiming to preserve heritage and culture amidst the destruction of cultural institutions at home. Shifting focus to Iran, human rights advocate Narges Mohammadi warns that the Iranian government is using the aftermath of its war with Israel to escalate repression against its own citizens. Meanwhile, in Syria, discussions are underway, facilitated by the United States, to end the border conflict, with Thomas J. Barrack, Jr., the U.S. ambassador to Turkey, saying Washington is prioritizing economic development over nation-building in the Middle East in talks between Israel and Syria. Japan is grappling with intense seismic activity as the government advises residents of Akuseki Island to evacuate following over 1,000 earthquakes in the Tokara Island chain since June 21st, further compounded by a magnitude 5.5 earthquake off the southwestern coast. Economically, Japan shows signs of recovery. Household spending has seen its largest increase since the summer of 2022. Foreign investment in Japanese stocks marks the longest continuous period since 2013. Wage talks for 2025 delivered the highest wage increase in 34 years, with an average rise of 5.25% secured by workers at Rengo-affiliated companies. Average pay increased by over 5% for the second consecutive year. Suzuki has become Japan's leading car importer, surpassing Mercedes-Benz due to the popularity of the Jimmy Nomad. Minor opposition parties are now emphasizing economic concerns to attract voters affected by rising living costs as campaigning commences for the House of Councillors election. In international affairs, Japan aims to be the world first in deep-sea mineral extraction while collaborating with the US, India and Australia to secure critical mineral supplies. Japan is also seeking an 8th round of tariff discussions with the US to commence early next week. Experts anticipate that China might test Japan's defenses by deploying drones near the contested islands in the East China Sea. Culturally, Banmai Takahashi's drama, I Am Kirishima, delves into the enigma of a radical fugitive who remained in hiding for decades. Japanese novelist Otani recently became the first writer from her country to win a major British award for crime and mystery writing. South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung, in his inaugural major press conference, indicated a shift from his predecessor Yoon Suk-yeol's policy. He voiced intentions to visit Japan promptly to foster dialogue and cooperation, focusing on security and economic matters. President Lee also committed to enhancing relationships with China and Russia to safeguard peace and its citizens. He expressed doubts about meeting the deadline for tariff negotiations with the United States, a deadline previously set by former US President Donald Trump. Separately, a North Korean man crossed the heavily fortified land border into South Korea and is now in South Korean custody. The motivation behind this crossing is still under investigation. Furthermore, analysts have noted a 30% surge in South Korean stocks due to the reinstatement of a unified government that has vowed to enact investor-friendly reform. Seoul is also currently grappling with a summer infestation of love bugs, leading municipal workers to use water sprays as a means of control. Meanwhile, in North Korea, the unidentified North Korean man who crossed the heavily fortified land border into South Korea is now in South Korean custody. The reasons for his crossing remain undetermined at this time. In entertainment news, the South Korean girl group Blackpink continues their Deadline World Tour, demonstrating their widespread global influence and highlighting their record-breaking accomplishments with a July 5th performance. Gaza saw the deaths of 94 Palestinians, a grim toll that included 45 individuals seeking aid. Tragically, 5 more people died near locations linked to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a recently formed discrete American entity backed by Israel to supply food to the Gazan population. Turning to the United States, former President Donald Trump will launch a year-long celebration in Iowa, marking the 250th anniversary of American independence, fulfilling his campaign pledge for a spectacular birthday party for the nation. Simultaneously, Trump's proposed energy policy bill aims to overhaul the American energy landscape by cutting tax incentives for wind, solar, and electric vehicles. The bill also seeks to uphold federal support for fossil fuels, nuclear reactors, and geothermal plants. Australia faces complex childcare issues, requiring multifaceted strategies, according to Minister Clare. Victoria is set to formalise the First Peoples Assembly through new legislation, granting decision-making power on Aboriginal affairs. To improve gender diversity, Liberal frontbencher Melissa McIntosh proposed gender-balanced candidate pools as a quota alternative. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's upcoming visit to China presents an opportunity to reset bilateral relations, focusing on climate cooperation and Australia's critical mineral resources. Tragically, an Australian man passed away from Australian bat virus after a bat bite. Indonesia is grappling with the aftermath of a ferry sinking off Ketapang, East Java, where a vessel carrying 65 people capsized in rough seas, leading to at least 5 confirmed deaths and 29 individuals still unaccounted for as rescue operations continue. Shifting focus to domestic policy, President Prabowo Subianto has committed to implementing a national free school meal program, framing it as a crucial investment in the nation's youth and a response to growing unemployment challenges. Economically, Indonesia is looking to leverage its extensive reserves of critical minerals to potentially influence the United States to ease existing tariffs. Adding a regional dimension, Singapore's Trade Minister Gan Kim Yong suggested further opportunities for Indonesia to expand the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. JS says, in the United States, former President Donald Trump voiced concerns about the volume of weaponry sent to Ukraine, advocating for the preservation of U.S. reserves. Trump also expressed disappointment over the lack of headway in discussions with Russian President Vladimir Putin concerning the Ukrainian conflict. This statement comes as the U.S. temporarily halts some military aid to Ukraine amidst escalating Russian offensive. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is currently in Denmark, where he is meeting with Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. These discussions aim to strengthen collaboration, particularly given the recent pause in U.S. military aid and the increased intensity of Russian attacks on Ukraine. Tragically, in Zambia, 2 tourists lost their lives after an elephant attack. Easton Janet Taylor, a 68-year-old from the UK, and Alison John Taylor, a 67-year-old from New Zealand, were participating in a walking safari within a national park when the incident occurred. The tragic news from Spain reports the deaths of Portuguese international footballer Diogo Jota, 28, a Liverpool striker, and his brother, André Silva, in a car accident near Zamora. Jota's recent marriage and his pivotal role in Liverpool's Premier League, FA Cup, and League Cup triumphs amplify the profound sense of loss felt by the football community and Liverpool fans. Simultaneously in Spain, Caitlin Kirk and Sam McHale, 2 students from Hawke's Bay, New Zealand, achieved success at the World Multisport Championships, securing silver and bronze medals, respectively. India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, is preparing for a visit to Trinidad and Tobago, where he will meet with President Christine Kalakangulu and Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bissessar to strengthen ties. The planned conferral of Trinidad and Tobago's highest honor upon Modi has sparked both celebration within the Indo-Trinidadian Hindu community and dissent from the largest Muslim organization. Domestically, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, a nationalist group linked to Modi's BJP party, argues that India's constitution's socialist and secular principles clash with the country's Hindu majority character. Thailand's political landscape remains turbulent, marked by the swearing-in of new cabinet members. Suspended Prime Minister Paetong Tan is among those appointed, even as she faces an ongoing ethics investigation, casting a shadow over the administration's legitimacy. The Thai government now grapples with a complex web of issues, from internal disputes that threaten to destabilize its foundation, to critical trade negotiations with the United States aimed at bolstering economic ties. Furthermore, Thailand is navigating a sensitive border dispute with Cambodia, requiring deft diplomacy to prevent escalation. Woven into these challenges is the persistent struggle to revitalize the nation's economy, demanding innovative policies and strategic investments. The newly appointed cabinet members formally commenced their duties by taking their oaths of office at Government House. Argentina saw a diplomatic sidestep as Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, while visiting Buenos Aires, chose to meet with former Argentinian President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, notably bypassing a meeting with the current Argentinian President Javier. Turning to Brazil, the central bank revealed that C&M Software, a technology services provider, was the target of a cyber-attack. This attack compromised the reserve accounts of several financial institutions. Further, Brazil is urging Mercosur, the South American trade bloc, to forge stronger economic links with Asia and Europe, aiming to diversify its markets amid shifting global trade patterns influenced by the United States. Amidst global tensions and domestic incidents, Germany navigates a complex landscape. Iranian officials have leveled accusations against Germany, alleging support for Israeli actions targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, and expressing disapproval of Germany's stance on Iran's reduced cooperation with the IAEA. Shifting to internal affairs, a violent incident occurred in Bavaria, where a man wielding an axe injured 4 individuals on a train before being apprehended by authorities. Further challenges emerged as wildfires ravaged eastern Germany, resulting in injuries to 2 firefighters and the displacement of over 100 residents. In a notable policy change, Germany's interior minister is now advocating for direct talks with the Taliban to address the repatriation of individuals to Afghanistan. France has linked its decisions regarding sanctions on Iran to the release of detained European nationals held by Iran, accusing the country of hostage-taking and claiming Iran is holding approximately 20 European nationals to extract concessions from Western nations. Separately, French clothing manufacturer St. James is withholding shipments to the United States in response to tariffs imposed during President Trump's administration. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced new measures to combat foreign interference in Canadian elections. These measures include increased monitoring of online platforms and stricter regulations on foreign funding for political campaigns. The government aims to safeguard the integrity of the democratic process amid growing concerns about external influence. In Brazil, President Lula da Silva is facing increasing pressure to address deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. Environmental groups are criticizing the government's slow progress in curbing illegal logging and mining activities. Lula da Silva has pledged to strengthen environmental protection, but faces significant challenges in implementing effective policies. Vietnam faces a complex situation with the new U.S. trade agreement, which imposes a 20% import tariff on Vietnamese exports. This development requires Vietnamese companies to strengthen their standing within the global value chain. Interestingly, Chinese manufacturers based in Vietnam are reportedly optimistic, with expectations that the majority will maintain their operations despite the tariffs. The US-Vietnam trade deal is also creating strategic challenges for Japan. In relation to US tariff policy, Greece is currently battling devastating wildfires on the island of Crete, prompting the evacuation of roughly 5,000 residents and tourists as gale force winds push flames toward residential areas and hotels. Across the Aegean Sea, Turkey is also struggling with intense wildfires where, tragically, 2 lives have already been lost, and thousands have been evacuated from affected areas. Experts suggest that climate change is a significant factor, intensifying the heat and wind conditions that fuel these destructive blazes in both countries. China's military conducted a significant drill in the Western Pacific. 2 aircraft carriers were involved in the exercise. This signals a potential increase in the intensity of Chinese military training. The exercise's complexity might surpass similar US military deployments. Denmark, now holding the EU presidency, is committed to aiding Ukraine's EU membership bid. The Danish EU presidency began with a ceremony in Aarhus. This occurs during the war in Ukraine and trade disputes with the US. The Philippines is strategically aligning with Japan through a one-theater approach to counter China's maritime assertiveness. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure to address rising inflation rates, which are impacting consumer spending and economic growth. Canada is also grappling with ongoing discussions regarding Indigenous land rights and resource development, creating tensions between economic progress and reconciliation efforts. In the latest from the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is navigating challenges related to the Northern Ireland Protocol, seeking a resolution with the European Union to ease trade tensions and political instability. The UK is also focused on implementing new policies to achieve its net zero carbon emissions targets by 2050, involving significant investments in renewable energy and green technology. Mexico is currently monitoring the trajectory of Tropical Storm Flossie, which has diminished in strength off the Pacific coast, registering maximum sustained winds of 60 mph. Meanwhile, a significant legal development involves boxer Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., for whom Mexican authorities have issued an arrest warrant, alleging connections with the Sinaloa cartel. Chavez Jr. was taken into custody in California by U.S. immigration officials. Finland experienced a concerning stabbing incident near a shopping center, leaving 4 individuals injured. Authorities have investigated and concluded that the attack is not related to terrorism or racial motivations. Uganda's national parks have revealed interactions between predatory species and fruit bats, which are known carriers of infectious diseases, presenting a potential area of study for interspecies viral transmission. In Chile, 19-year-old aviator Ethan Guo, attempting a solo flight across all 7 continents, was detained after landing in Antarctica. Though now released, he continues to face logistical difficulties in departing the area. Austria has deported a 32-year-old Syrian man with a criminal record back to Syria, marking the first such deportation since the fall of the Assad regime, according to Interior Minister Gerhard Kahner. Palau hosted the 2025 Pacific Mini-Games, where Samoa, Fiji, and Northern Marianas collectively broke Tahiti's long-standing winning streak in swimming. Moving to South Africa, former Deputy President David Mabuza has died at the age of 64. Mabuza played a key role in Cyril Ramaphosa's ascent to the presidency, though his career was also shadowed by allegations of corruption. In El Salvador, lawyers are claiming that Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia was subjected to beatings and torture while imprisoned, including being forced to kneel overnight and being held in an overcrowded cell. Haiti is facing a crisis as the UN reports that gangs have achieved near total control of the capital, Port-au-Prince, extending their attacks beyond the periphery and into previously secure neighborhoods. Singapore is seeing a challenge to its radio broadcast code, with a Singaporean actor and blogger contesting a clause that equates homosexuality with pedophilia and incest, calling for a review. Following Jamaica's formal request to King Charles to seek legal advice, a slavery reparations group is actively lobbying in Westminster and Brussels, seeking support for their cause. Malaysia and Indonesia are deepening their relations with Russia, demonstrating positive attitudes towards President Putin and exploring opportunities to expand trade and business partnerships. Costa Rica's Inter-American Court of Human Rights has issued a ruling recognizing a human right to a stable climate, thereby establishing a duty for states to protect it. Italy will once again see Pope Francis spending his summer at Castel Gandolfo, renewing excitement in the town. Finally, Fiji's Prime Minister has offered 5,000 soldiers to assist the Australian Defence Force in addressing its current personnel shortage. In the United States, the Supreme Court has affirmed the Trump administration's power to deport 8 migrants detained in Djibouti to South Sudan. Turning to Myanmar, a military fighter jet has gone missing in an active combat area. A local resistance organization has claimed responsibility, alleging they downed the aircraft. Regarding Turkey and Iraq, a Kurdish militant organization situated in Iraq has declared it will start disarming. This action is part of the ongoing peace talks with Turkey. Switching gears to Armenia, the nation is strengthening ties with China. This is an effort to diversify its foreign policy and reduce its dependence on Russia. Adding to global news, Nissan is recalling more than 480,000 vehicles in both the United States and Canada due to manufacturing flaws that could result in engine problems. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.